to Chakra News. The Indian Air Force is retiring its MiG-21 fighter jets. It is an iconic aircraft that's been in the IAF service for 60 years, more than 60 years, in fact. And at one point, it made up for over 60% of the Indian Air Force's strength. Literally every one of our pilots at some point or the other have flown the MiG-21. It's part of the Indian Air Force's history. And I have with me today, I'm privileged to have with me today, Air Marshal Harish Masand, Veer Chakra. He's a MiG-21 pilot. He's flown several aircraft, but he's most passionate about the MiG-21. He's in fact brought the MiG-29 into service as well. Air Marshal Masand, I couldn't think of anyone else but you to speak about the MiG-21. Welcome to Chakra News.
Thank you, Sandeep. Very kind of you to give me these kind of, the welcome. I'm not certain I deserve it, but thank you.
Air Marshal Masand, before I ask you my questions, I want to read out this extract from a book called Witness to Surrender. Now, it is written by Brigadier Siddiq Salih. He was the press advisor to the government of East Pakistan in 1971. And he writes on page 206 that the governor and his principal aides waited for orders from Rawalpindi, but the president seemed too busy to take a decision, president being Yahya Khan. Now, the governor here is Governor Abdul Muttalib Malik, governor of East Pakistan. And the following day, he writes, on the 14th of December, for which a high-level meeting was fixed, 3 Indian MiG-21s attacked Government House at 11:15 a.m. and ripped the massive roof of the main hall. The governor rushed to the air raid shelter and scribbled out his resignation. Almost all the inmates of the seat of power survived the raid. It's an interesting fact. Except for some fishes in a decorative glass case. They restlessly tossed on the hot rubble and breathed their last. And 2 days later, just 2 days after this, East Pakistan, the entire garrison surrendered. I don't think there's been a better description of the MiG-21 in action than these lines from the adversary's side. Tell us where you were on the 14th of December, 1971, in the skies over East Pakistan.
So, Sandeep, the MiG-21's rightly, as Brigadier Salih has written, but actually he's mistaken about a few facts, in my opinion, because actually it was 6 MiG-21s from Guwahati.
Right.
It was 4 MiG-21s from 28th Squadron, the cap that I'm wearing, and which I commanded later.
Right.
Okay. First Supersonics, led by then Wing Commander Boob Bishnoi, and 2 MiG-21s with him from 4th Squadron.
Right.
Commanded by Denzel Keeler.
Right.
And at the same time, Air Headquarters had passed this order to Eastern Air Command, Air Marshal Dewan being the CNC. At the same time, I was in Hasimar and 37th Squadron, Hunters.
Right. Hunters.
So at the same time, four Hunters from 37 were also tasked to do the same thing. And the timing was Bangladesh time noon, actually. 12 o'clock was the meeting at that time. So Indian Standard Time would have been probably 11:30 for us, and 12 o'clock for them because they were half an hour ahead of us everywhere. So we actually, Wing Commander Bishnoi is described as Sopi Kaul, who was my CEO and the leader of the Hunter formation. We got very little notice to do this, frankly, because this intelligence came about this meeting, this crucial meeting, only at the last minute, I think about 10:30 our time. And we were rushed for a briefing. And the funniest part was that we actually in base off, we asked, okay, so where's the governor's house? In Dhaka, it's a city. How do you recognize that? And nobody had a map. And somehow the ops officer there pulled out from somewhere a Burma shell map, a tourist map of Second World War vintage, which are a city map tourist map. Right. And on that, we kind of, figured out where governor's house and we went. So both the MiGs and us attacked one after the other. Who attacked first is not important to me really at the moment because the effect was the same. But can you imagine when this meeting was there going on and we blasted our rockets through the dome of that governor's house. We also put our guns through and rockets through the between the colonnades, what we thought was the conference room.
Right.
Because nobody told us where it is, but right next to the center on the right, as we saw it, as we flew in, we put in this attack. And I believe there was shambles because later BBC reported and various people reported, which I read much, much later as we grew up. But they reported that Governor Malik actually hid under a table on the spot. He went under a table and signed his resignation on the spot and then ran off to the Intercontinental Hotel, which was a secure place for all the UN and the diplomats and the other officials. So I would say it was a decisive blow at a correct time. More importantly, it showed, I mean, at that time, you must remember that at that time, the army was also on the gates of Dhaka.
Yes.
Particularly General Sagat from Four Corps from the east had moved in, and he was knocking on the doors of Dhaka despite orders not to do so from his command. And from the north, General Nagaraj with 101 communication zone also with two paras that had been dropped at Tangel on the 11th. They were also approaching Dhaka or on the outskirts of Dhaka. So this synergy between the army pressing over there and the Air Force attacking actually resulted in this, and there's one more attack on that. Now, because I was told much later, when I was a flying officer, so I
Right.
didn't know all the higher details at that time, but much later when I read about it,
You were 24 years old at that time.
Pakistanis, sorry,
You were 24 years old
sorry,
at that time.
yeah, 24, just 24, yeah, I'm 25. So we were young, and uh, the Pakistanis still had some 30, 40,000 troops inside Dhaka,
Right.
which had been withdrawn. So if they had stood up and fought, the street fighting through towns, you can take forever. So Bangladesh, I mean, wouldn't have been liberated the way it was because the troops they had. But they lost their nerve because of the kind of attack we did. And the best part is we followed up similar attacks, same MiG-21s and Hunters. On the 15th, we attacked the university, Dhaka University, where the information had come that all the troops were actually hiding over there. So literally, when we went and attacked those places, we sent a message which I have written about and I coined. I said, you can run, but you can't hide.
Right.
We will get you.
So
And
what is it
actually,
about the MiG-21, Marshal Masand? You were, of course, I've read your accounts of, you've written your piece about the MiG-21 very recently in Vayu, which is very interesting first-person account. You never got to fly the MiG-21 at the time that you wanted to, but you kind
yeah,
of, you kind of became
made
a
up.
fighter instructor and you commanded the squadron. And of course, tell us what it was about the MiG-21 as an aircraft that was so fascinating to you as a young pilot.
Well, I'll tell you, yeah, when we were flying Hunters, at that time I've written about it. Uh, Obviously, our younger guys were going directly to MiG-21. We were stuck in Hunters, and Hunters were getting old.
Right.
We weren't getting enough flying. So, we thought the world was passing us by in a way. I mean, I'll put it that way. So at the end of the war and just after the war, when I'd finished 4 years in Hunters, I had put in a request for transfer to supersonics,
Right.
thinking supersonics make MiG-21s. Some guy with a dry sense of humor in elite quarters put me in Su-7s, okay, which was also supersonic aircraft ground attack.
But it wasn't the
Despite,
supersonic.
yeah. So anyway, so I got into the MiG-21 with 8 years, almost with 8 years service after I finished my instructor's course and
Right.
landed up under a very able commander called Jasjeet Singh in
Yes.
17th Squadron in Halwara at that time.
Right.
And started flying the MiG-21. Having read and, been, shall I say, I came from engineering background. I'd done 3 years of
Yes.
engineering before I joined. I was interested, my father was interested that I become an engineer actually. So aerodynamics and ground subjects, I mean, came easy to me. I understood everything. And sure enough, I found the MiG-21 was designed actually, if you look at it, with a Delta platform for quick climb to 40, 50,000 feet.
Right.
To intercept American bombers, launch 2 missiles or 1 or 2 missiles down one and back, okay, and land. 20, 30-minute trip maximum because that's the kind of gas it carried. It wasn't designed for the kind of stuff that we later employed it for in the Indian Air Force.
Right.
With the Delta platform, while it gave you tremendous climb rates and speeds, supersonic speeds, came the penalty that in a turning fight, the induced drag was so high that it bled off speed.
Right.
Okay. So you had to, shall I say, handle the MiG-21 with care. I mean, while it was difficult to fly initially, I mean, for most people, I had experience, of course, for ab initio people, it's difficult to fly. Uh, and it was unforgiving, unlike a hunter or a net, which you could mishandle and still recover easily. This one, if you mishandle, you got into what was it, uh, earlier known as a super stall. I used to call it Jesus Christ Superstall because if you remember in the 70s, there
Movie
was a
had come
great
out.
song called
Yes.
Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yes.
Okay, that LP was going around. So uh, some people who came with these old habits obviously got into that kind of a situation, not realizing that they were trying to use the aircraft in a manner that was not designed for, and
Right.
got into the superstall, and that led to some of the initial accidents.
Right.
So the MiG-21, because of this characteristic, actually taught you to respect the aircraft, to respect its envelope, and handle it with care, and taught you, shall I say, how to fly, the flying technique wise, improve your flying technique, basically. So I would say that actually it taught me a lot, because after that, flying other aircraft became, I would say, much easier, having flown the 21 already. All the other aircraft which came later, like the 29 or the Su-30, which I flew, became much easier because this aircraft actually. And then the Air Force, obviously, because we were dependent on the MiG-21, as you said, 60% or more of the Air Force was MiG-21s at that time, at one time. Actually, it amounted to 24 squadrons, plus some of the specialized units like TACD,
Right.
Top Gun School, or the AST and others. So 24 plus,
Right.
quite frankly, right? So I learned a lot from the 21 in the 10 years that I spent on 21 before I went on to other things. And of course, out of those 10 years, I spent 3 years in the base upgrade, actually getting it upgraded. We'll talk about that later if
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
want.
Absolutely. And part of that, your MiG-21 expertise was that very interesting phase in the 80s when you went to Iraq and you trained Iraqi pilots. Um,
Yes.
You were one of the very few Indian instructors who trained foreign air forces in that sense. What was that experience like, and how good were the Iraqis as MiG-21 pilots? Given that they were against the Iranian Air Force that is primarily American trained.
Well, yeah, I got this opportunity in 79 as one of the younger instructors at that time. And frankly, I went in the fighter combat leader uh, slot, I'll put it that way, because I was a TACD instructor by then in 79. And so we went down to what is again, as luck, coincidentally, 17 Squadron of the Iraqi Air Force. 17 Squadron is where I started the
Right,
MiG-21.
of course. And
And
you went
here
to
now I'm 17 Squadron of the Iraqi Air Force training them. As pilots, I would say basic flying wise, the Iraqis were probably as good as anybody else, because instinctively they flew well. But where I found them lacking was in their shall I say, knowledge about the aircraft, technicalities, exploitation of the aircraft in different manners. And I remember, when the war started, the Iran war started, soon after that, there was a Major Osama, I still remember, who was the officiating squadron commander of 17 Squadron, though he just did the administrative work. We flew as instructors. He They'd given us, just before the war started, about 10 days before, they had told us, oh, don't come to work, we will let you know. And we all knew that something was brewing. And I remember having told Osama, if you're going to war, okay, with Iran, please finish it in 2 weeks, because after that you will get battered. The Iranians were a much bigger
yeah,
nation with more, despite the 79 problem where they lost American support, they
right,
still had those systems. And we
right,
saw these F4 Phantoms coming right over Kut where I was running. I know you're probably short. I'll shorten this briefly. So Osama now comes to me to my house. I'm living in town one day during the war and says, "Sir, how do I launch a bomb low level?
right,
You know, because to evade radar." So I said, "All right. So what's the what target?" He says, "I can't tell you. That's secret." I said, well, tell me the type, don't tell me the place, because what kind of a bomb? Tell me. Can't tell you. Can't tell you. Everywhere can't tell you. So I said, Sama, I'll tell you what, if you're taking a normal bomb and you're going to release it at a low level, You see the well behind my house? Why don't you go jump in there? It's easier to kill yourself that way, instead of taking an aircraft with you. Because he didn't realize actually that the bomb travels with you at low level, it explodes right under you,
Right.
same velocity. So you don't do this kind of stuff unless you have a retarder bomb, unless you have some other means, okay, or you have a vertical target with a delayed fuse or something like that.
Right.
They were lacking in that. But in terms of flying, basic flying, because in the 17th Squadron, I realized they had different versions of the 21, P, PFF, F, M, and they didn't care, which aircraft you were flying. Everybody flew one to the other, though the switches were slightly different and systems were slightly different.
Right.
But everybody flew without having to go through a conversion or a familiarization. You just jumped into the cockpit, checked, okay, this is what it is, and flew. And these young guys also flew the same aircraft.
Right. So, what is it about the architecture of the MiG-21 that allowed you to, fly different, aircraft types without really looking around? Was it very user-friendly in that sense?
Well, actually, that is the Russian method. If you look at the Sukhoi 7, the MiG-21, even the 29 later, their basic instrumentation and the basic stuff is the same.
Right.
So you feel very comfortable, having gone through it because the same kind of instrumentation, the same indication. It's just the individual system switches that you have to worry about. So going from one to the other, like Su-7, MiG-21, similar, absolutely. MiG-29 to Su-30, absolutely the same, actually bigger size and things like that. So it's much easier to switch from one to the other because the philosophy and the kind of design that they follow is similar.
Right. So, M.R. Shivasan, the MiG-21, outstanding aircraft as it was, Indian Air Force exploited it in ways that possibly the Russians hadn't either. But, in the late 90s, early 2000s, it got this very unfortunate reputation of being a flying coffin. You remember that debate. The defense minister, George Fernandez, had to fly in one to induce confidence in the aircraft. What was the reason for those crashes? Like we're reading those 170 Indian pilots, 40 civilians have died in this since the 60s, the number of crashes. And out of the 840 aircraft built, majority of them, half of them were lost to crashes. Who's responsible for this? Who do you blame for this?
Well, I don't blame anybody, but because you look at it, if you look at the facts, the first thing is that the MiG-21 served us for 62 years.
Right.
It is not that these crashes happened in one day or whatever.
Right.
Like I said, also that we were 24% or more. I mean, 60% or more, 24 squadrons or more of MiG-21. So naturally, any crash, I mean, if you take proportions of all fighter fleets, 60% or around there should have been MiG-21s. But unfortunately, people who wrote or gave this moniker of flying coffin and widowmaker, whatever, I think it was more sensational and they hardly checked the facts behind it. Second reason I'll give you. The MiG-21, any MiG crash, and we had 23s, 25s, 27, 29s also, okay? But any MiG crash and everybody said, oh, another MiG is gone. Right. So, the public perception of MiG being an unsafe aircraft grew there. Three, as you said earlier and you mentioned briefly, the Indian Air Force very innovatively decided after the 65 war itself that the MiG-21 in its basic air defense role was not adequate, Right. We had to get it into ground attack, we had to modify it. So we went on to follow recce, more operations at low level. That's not the place it was designed for. With its nose, the environment, Indian environment at low level where, all cities around and populated areas and the hardly unpopulated areas in India, bird intensity, which is actually supposed to be the responsibility of the civil administration to make sure that within 10 kilometers of the airfield, there are no butcheries, etc., but hardly got implemented. The MiG-21 finally was the design of the 1950s, right, kind of technology it used. So just like in the old days when you drove on the road and you saw ambassadors and Fiats with their bonnets open, right, obviously you would have some unserviceabilities in those aircraft. Aircraft over the years have become more reliable. Lastly, the MiG-21 finally had to be pushed into into the training role for ab initio pilots because of the lack of an advanced trained trainer. That's something, like I said earlier, it was a difficult aircraft to unforgiving aircraft to fly. And to get ab initio pilots there also was a problem which did contribute to these accidents. But when you take the total numbers, okay, 400 aircraft or whatever, and you take the accident rate, actually more important because the number of hours that you flew, and the Air Force, as far as I remember, calculated the accident rate at aircraft accidents per 10,000 hours.
Right.
The world calculates at 100,000 hours, we calculated 10,000 hours. And that rate of 10,000 hours for the Air Force, as far as I remember, for a long, long time till I left, 20 years ago, was hovering around initially 2 per 10,000 hours, and later, with improvements in technology and methodologies and training and AJT came, it dropped to about 1.5, 1.6, somewhere there. When you track the MiG-21, if you plot it again,
Yeah.
these 400 aircraft, again, it becomes less than 2. So it was comparable. I mean, I would put it this way, comparable to the aircraft around the world, contemporary aircraft around the world, like the others which were flying around the same time, F-104 Starfighter of the
Right.
US Air Force in Pakistan, Germany. Actually, that's the aircraft that got the moniker first of Widowmaker.
The
Somebody
Starfighter.
quickly pushed
Right.
it. So if you look at the accident rates, the MiG-21 was not so, I mean, it was comparable, maybe perhaps a little better, okay,
Right.
in many. I don't have the exact numbers with me straight away, but if somebody was to dig into it and get the exact data, you will find that, frankly, it didn't perform any worse than the other aircraft. It just got
Right.
this moniker for the heck of it.
Right. So,
So, so
definitely.
these are the kind of reasons, basically, that even another rough calculation that I did, 62 years, 400 aircraft.
Yeah.
Less than seven loss per year. Okay, if you look at it like that, I mean, you calculate that away, average, right? And the Air Force generally in the old days was about losing 20 odd aircraft, fighters, okay, per year. So 7 is less than 35% of the losses for the MiG-21, while it contributed or constituted 60%, 50%, 45% of the fleet. So looked at anyway, actually, if you look at the data from all angles and look at it, it wasn't bad. So it's just an unfortunate um, uh, attempt to sensationalize the whole issue that, this got this moniker. I mean, I've flown almost 2,000 missions, more than 2,000 missions on the MiG-21.
Right.
Always brought me back.
Right.
And the best part is I have flown with youngsters, trained them like in, training role,
Right.
been flight commander of one squadron and trained youngsters from all there. All those guys are still alive.
Right.
Okay. Nobody had a problem.
Right.
Yes, there are also maintenance issues, old technology. HAL also has got some, part to play there because they made some mistakes in overall.
Right.
Fitted some components wrong, forgot something, left some foreign objects, all kinds of things. I don't have the exact numbers, so, I can't distribute it.
Right.
Budget-wise, maintenance problem-wise. And of course, in combat flying, when you're taking the aircraft to its extreme limits, there will be some losses because
Right.
of human error.
Right.
Okay, so that also
Absolutely.
contributed to it.
So, Emma now, the LCA Tejas was rather meant to be a one-on-one replacement for the MiG-21. Do you see that happening in the numbers that the Air Force has ordered? There are 200 plus LCA Mark 1As with many more AMCAs, Mark 2s and all that to follow. Do you see the LCA Tejas being the spirit successor to the MiG-21?
Well, the LCA, if you remember in the 80s, was actually sanctioned and designed as a replacement for the MiG-21.
Right.
But frankly, it's a better aircraft than the MiG-21 because technology had improved and, obviously the scientists also wanted to do more with the aircraft and get more out of it. The Air Force also projected its requirements and said, okay, if this aircraft's going to come in by, at that time, the estimate was around early 2000, okay? But then it finally flew its first flight in 2000 because of various problems, sanctions from the US and whatever. So in the meantime, the Air Force, like I said, went in for the BIS upgrade and called it the Bison Wolf, which I was in charge. It's a long story, but I published a chapter on it. So the LCA will actually be not just a replacement, it will be more than that. And we've added on many things. But then back again in the LCA, if you look at it, our major problem has been the engine,
Right.
which actually was the problem with the HF-24, which was a great
Yes.
aircraft, in my opinion. But because of the engine problem, slowly, we kind of discarded that. If we had resolved the engine problem on those days, 60s and 70s, probably the HF-24 would have built on, and then, successors would have come, the technology and the expertise would have remained with us.
Right.
Now, the second problem with the LCA has been, uh, I was in the program. I was put as the advisor to ADA just before I retired for about 8, 9 months in ADA. The problem is that we are too slow on both the development, testing, as well as the manufacturing. I mean, even today, HL says we can manufacture 16 aircraft per year.
Right.
That's a very slow rate. At that rate, to get 200 aircraft into the service, like 83 and 90 something seven that have been ordered already, it'll take you years, by the time it comes. And by then again, shall I say, in many ways, it'll get outdated for the current battle scenario.
Right.
So even now, when the HL says we are, improving the manufacturing to about 30 aircraft per year or 36 aircraft per year, it's not enough. I mean, you have to. All this should have been planned earlier, actually, and we should have had. By now, we should have had 100 LCAs in service, maybe, if if
Right.
if not earlier.
Right.
Because as the biz, I mean, we upgraded it, extended its life. Now the biz is retiring.
Right.
2025, finally, it can't carry on forever. And even now we have how many? As far as I know, there's 2, 3 squadrons of LCA total,
Yes.
which is too little. It
Too
should have
little.
been actually 10.
Right. So,
Yeah.
finally, in closing, you're going to be part of that grand ceremony where the MiG-21 is going to fly out of service finally. Any thoughts? What are your thoughts on this day? This is an aircraft that's been a part of your career in the Air Force. It's been your first love, if I can call it that, when you
Yeah.
the Air
Yeah.
Force. And
True.
did you actually think you would come to a time when you would be actually saying goodbye to her?
Well, before I answer that, let me finish one more point that I wanted to mention about the LCA program. Basically, is um, that in terms of numbers and others, uh, even in 2005 when I was there, I kept telling others that plan ahead and design, think of something else,
Hmm.
move. You should actually be planning things 3 years before they hit you
Right.
in design and development. Okay, in terms of manufacturing lines, the same way that okay, fine, I'm going to do this. Engine, of course, is another issue. Um, uh, what was it? There was just something that I want. More important, yeah, very important. The point that I wanted to make is that actually speaking, I've written this also and published it. We launch people. I mean, we launch a moon rover on the south side. We launched an anti-satellite many years ago in 2018, 19. So we actually Indians are capable of doing it. Everything, all this, aeronautical problems that we've got, engine development, everything else, we're capable of doing it. The problem is, I think, in my opinion, is higher direction and management.
Right.
If we get the right leadership in those kind of organizations, and if we push correctly with people who have vision and who are thinking ahead and how to progress these things, we can do it, and far cheaper than anybody else. Like somebody mentioned, the moon program cost us only less than what the movie cost us. Gravity cost us. So I think we're capable of doing it. It's just question of getting harnessing it correctly and pushing it into a good project. Okay, so now saying goodbye to the MiG-21, it's always difficult. Let me tell you. I mean, once you've been with a machine for so many years and flown such a lot, learned from it. Uh, it's like saying goodbye to a loved one, finally. But then I'm a realist and I say, well, all good things must come to an end sometime or the other. MiG-21 has served us well in the upgraded version, also for many years. Abhinandan's engagement being one of the examples of what it could do if we had the capability to keep it flying for longer in larger numbers. But then finally we have to say goodbye. Yeah, so you'll feel the loss. I mean, and I'm very happy to go there and meet all the, shall I say, before me there was so many stalwarts and predecessors who actually set the pace on the MiG-21 and taught me a lot myself. I'd love to meet them and then share some old incidents, memories, exchange, views. Well, it'll be sad, and I don't see a replacement because at the moment, immediately.
Right.
So the Air Force is going to struggle, like the chief keeps saying, is going to struggle with 29 squadrons for some time unless we get something going. And we got to get our act together on this. What more? I mean, I've written about it, published it, so what more can I say?
Thank you very much, Air Marshal Masan. Such an entertaining conversation, and I've learned so much as always talking to you. Wish you all the very best, and look forward to catching up with you soon on Chakra News.
In Chandigarh, maybe, if you're there.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. Thank you for having me, and a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, sir.